Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4. Go.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Shutsky. I'm a political reporter with KJZZ, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Voters that are watching this debate live can submit questions at any time. They can email debates@kc-a.com, text 408-302-1810, or call 480-937-1253. Now, we may not get to all of your questions, but we're going to do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from candidates in Legislative District 22, which covers part of the Southwest Valley, including Tolleson and Avondale. As this is part of the primary election debate, candidates are competing against others in their party to become the official nominee. All registered voters, including independent voters, can participate in the primary. Independent voters must choose a single party ballot that they would like to vote through. We'll kick off the evening by hearing from the Democratic candidates in the Senate, who will debate their opponent for approximately 1 hour, and then we'll move on to House candidates and conclude around 8 p.m. Only the candidates currently debating will appear and with their cameras and microphones on. For the candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel you need to respond to another candidate's comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment, so just please keep that in mind. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so that the electorate may vote informed. All the candidates participating tonight are Democrats. The candidates running for the Senate, for which voters may elect one, are Senator Eva Diaz and former Representative Lisa Sun. Next up, we'll have the House, where voters can select 2 candidates, and the candidates who are appearing tonight are Betsy Munoz and Jen Wynn. Representative Lupe Contreras and Representative Elda Luna Nahara are also candidates in the House race, but are not participating in the debate tonight. So now we'll get to it. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting for their opening comments. Closing comments will go in reverse order. So without further ado, Senator Diaz, will you start with opening remarks, please?
Yes, thank you, Wayne, for the introduction, and thank you to the Clean Elections for hosting this event in order to inform our voters. My name is Dr. Eva Diaz. I'm an Arizona native. I've lived in LD22 for over 3 decades. I'm fluent in Spanish. I'm a graduate of Grand Canyon University and Arizona State University. I have served in the Arizona State Senate since 2022. I am proud to represent LD22 as a member of the State Senate. I'm a Democrat who is a tireless fighter for families in our community. Education is my passion. I'm a lifelong educator, having served almost 30 years in Arizona Title I public schools as a teacher and school administrator. My mother, as well as my grandmother, were wonderful role models, as they were also public school teachers in Phoenix Title I schools. My husband and I are proud parents of children who attend public schools. As state senator, I prioritize effective public education and quality, affordable health care. I'm a champion for women's rights and minority rights. I made a decision to run in 2024 because we need someone with integrity. We need someone who respects democracy. We need a teacher voice to continue fighting for public education, working families, affordable housing, affordable health care, and our Latino community. I'm proud that the past 2 years I've made strong relationships at the Capitol and fought against bills that would hurt our communities. I fought for more funding for public schools and universities. I'm running for re-election to continue the work I've started.
All right, Senator Diaz, we're going to have to cut it off there, and I'll give Ms. Sun the same amount of time. Ms. Sun, now could you please start with your opening remarks?
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for Citizen Clean Election for having us and having this debate. This is the 3rd time I am participating. I am very proud to say that I'm dedicating to improve our district, LD22, for everyone, especially working families. I'm also a former State House representative with a commitment to building community wealth. I've received stellar legislative scorecard ratings from Progressive Arizona, the Sierra Club, and the Arizona Center for Economic Progress. I value people over dark money and corporations. I demand better quality jobs. We should all demand higher wages, better working conditions, more robust healthcare, and better funded public education. I'm dedicated to fighting for all these issues and has a proven track record of championing unions and working families. I believe in improving education funding for students and teachers and providing a brighter future for all Arizonans. I want to end all kinds of predatory practices and unfair zoning standards, which create inhospitable living conditions for our most vulnerable population. And above all, I'm the only candidate in this race who has signed a pledge to run as a citizen clean election candidate for the third time and never taking fossil fuel donations. This means I will vow to never take special interest or big donor dollars for my campaign, ever. Please join me with your vote and let's put people back into politics. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. Moving on to my first question here. One of the main jobs of the legislature is to pass a budget. So we're going to start there. The state is currently facing a budget shortfall, a deficit, and some difficult decisions have to be made to balance that budget. So can you name one area where you would cut in order to help balance the budget? We'll start with you, Ms. Sun.
Thank you, Wayne. When my first year in the Capitol, the budget was highly contested within our party. Obviously, we knew on the other side, across the aisle, they were just happy as anyone can be with the budget. But within our party, we struggled internally, with the ninth floor to really make it clear to all Arizonans that the budget isn't just a one section. It's the complete piece of the budget. And we need to look at it in a way that it will serve community well. And one of the contested heated debate was the vouchers. And although it was supported by vast candidates out of the 90 legislatures, we're talking about both sides of the party, were pushing for it. But there was a small group, a voice within the chamber that did cry out that if we were to pass this budget, it will put us in the red. So we knew better. And now the question is, moving forward, will those voices be heeded? And I am prepared to go back to the chamber and to fight for our community and voice opposition on a budget that we know is going to put us in the red. Unfortunately, the numbers we've seen is that it's going to be will be affecting us in the next 3 years, which is a perfect play timeline for the Republicans in case they want to come back in 2026 or 2030. So we need to be cognitive of that, and we need to be united and to really push back and definitely give the voice to all Arizonans.
Okay, and then same question to you, Senator Diaz. Where you're involved in some of these budget negotiations right now, where would you cut to try and bring the state budget back to health?
Well, I believe as a public school teacher and a daughter of public school teachers, I am a proud public school supporter. So I would, in order to give more money to the public school system, I would cut ESAs and vouchers or put a limit on them at least. That's where I would begin. And I would also make it a point to not give any particular people the special pet projects and include those projects in the budget. That's just not fair, and that's taking money away from our schools and our cities and our state. So I would cut out or put a limit on vouchers and ESAs. And in my conversations on the current budget negotiations, that has been my priority, not only this year, but it was last year. Last year, we did pass a bipartisan budget, and that budget did incorporate some money for public education. Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, and we'll stick with you for my follow-up on this, which is talked about cuts, and you mentioned public education as a priority. Any other areas of the budget where you would like to continue spending, maybe even increase spending moving forward?
I would definitely put money into preschool education. I know that's part of the education, the public school system, but in speaking with local superintendents at this moment, they are in need of funding for running their public school, their preschool programs in our public schools. So I would incorporate that in preschool programs in order to for our children to start a really strong, good foundation of learning in our public school system. I would begin with public schools overall and education as an educator.
Thank you. And then, Ms. Sun, the same question: where would you like to prioritize spending?
Prioritizing spending really has to go within the agencies that is currently being teared down, as you guys saw with the sunset reviews. One particular area will be transportation. The beauty of transportation, which I had the privilege of being a member of that committee, was the Prop 400E. And there we've seen a lot of matching funds. And we want to focus where we can, knowing that our budget is going to be so limited in the coming years, we may want to start collaborating with the federal level with matching grants. Usually they're quite generous, especially with infrastructure as well as, education. So if we can focus on that and save and preserve funding for matching fund, usually as low as 10%, which is amazing. With the broadband initiative, that was at a 10%, meaning we give in 10% at the state level from our coffer, and then we'll be matched with 90% with federal. And we have a great opportunity to work with the federal level, knowing that it's a blue administration, as well as upcoming potential allocation. So that's pretty exciting. Even though we may be choked here at the legislative level, we need to be more strategic and think outside of our state for funding and support.
Thank you. And then, so moving to a new topic, but related, you had mentioned zoning, Representative Sun. We've seen several proposals moving through the legislature this year to address the housing crisis, the affordability crisis. Some of them vetoed, some of them signed. Do you believe that deregulating city zoning laws is a part of that solution? Because that is kind of where a lot of these bills that have gone through have focused. So Representative Sun, we'll start with you.
I know that several of my colleagues were championing with housing, affordable housing, homelessness, and so forth, and I applaud them. When you're in a minority party and very few bills get assigned, let alone heard in committee, I think it was a miracle that we had some of the housing bills coming out. The problem that I had with some of those bills was the language. We challenged with languages with "not in my backyard." We don't want to take voices away from our community. We want committees to be in the layer of the municipality orders of public opinion and public meetings. So these committees are very, very important. Some of the bills were trying to remove those layer of public participation. One of the arguments that they used was that "not in my backyard." The issue there is that if you're at the municipality level and you're in a marginalized community, particularly low income, You want to have more voices come to the table. So you don't want bills with languages where it strips away, thinking that maybe we can build affordable housing in the wealthier communities. Chances are of that happening is pretty low. You want to go into a community where you will have community support and where the need is at. Affordable housing, and what we need to move forward now is to really flip the ledge, have the majority so we can have really robust affordable housing bills. I know that so many of my colleagues have amazing bills. So that is just something I'm looking forward to see if we ever flip the house.
Thank you. And same question to you, Senator Diaz. Do you think these deregulation bills are part of the solution, or are they distracting from other solutions that you think may be more effective?
I think they are part of the solution. In speaking with a champion on zoning, a member of my caucus, she and I have talked about this, and I believe that it is something that could help with affordable housing. But I understand as I go door to door talking to families in our community, they talk about how it's harder and harder for middle-class families to buy homes. And it only hurts more when rents have increased over 30% in just the last 2 years. And this is not sustainable. The governor dedicated over $200 million to building more affordable housing and signed some key legislation that helps create more supply of affordable housing. And these are some bills that we have voted and passed this year.
Thank you. Now, to get a little bit more broad on it, what are some policies that you support to address the housing situation that either haven't been successful at the legislature or that maybe haven't even been introduced yet? We'll stick with you, Senator Diaz.
Yes, I support SB 1162, which does have to do with zoning, residential zoning. HB 2297, commercial buildings, adaptive reuse. HB 2720, accessory dwelling units and requirements. HB 2721, municipal zoning and middle housing. This allows the construction of missing middle housing types with central city areas and large new developments.
And those are some of those measures have been signed by the governor. Is there anything that you see that hasn't been done yet that you'd like to see? Maybe if the Democrats take the majority, as Ms. Sun said, to address this issue.
Well, I believe that this is a good start, and as a senator, for LD22, this is one of my priorities that I'm going to continue working on in the years to come.
Thank you. And then same question to you, Ms. Sun, is what other, beyond what we've seen so far, what other policies are you supportive of to address this affordable housing issue?
We know that we have our local municipalities, and every municipality, district, and location have different needs for affordable housing. But one thing that is universal among all the municipality leadership is that they want to have repeals. A lot of these already been set in motion to have their hands tied to allow affordable housing. And it varies from location to location, of course, the density, the zoning, the landscape. So the very first thing I'll be pushing for, if someone was to bring affordable housing bill to the committee for hearing and then onto the floor, would be to repeal the inclusionary zoning. That will really enhance our local government to have the need and the resources and the ability to create affordable housing without the interference of stipulations from developers. And that is something that we need to be very cognitive of when we write our bills. And I know that we have amazing colleagues that's championing in that. So again, once we flip the ledge, we have a list of bills that we want to push and to repeal. But mostly it has to be the repeal. Ideally, strategically, you want those to be back the way it was, and then add the additionals, like the icing on the cake. So it's very exciting. I look forward to working on and collaborating.
Thank you. And when we talk about housing and we talk about building new housing, that conversation can't be divorced from water. Obviously, you can't do anything without water. So when we're talking about effective groundwater management for Arizona's future, what improvements or reforms would you like to see the state take in its approach to groundwater management to address the current challenges and projected future needs? We'll stick with you, Ms. Sun.
Well said, Wayne. Our water supply is directly linked to our housing and developing. One thing that we do need to clearly state that we need to hold the developers accountable for that assurance of water availability. Heavens forbid, if that's unregulated, any developers can say, we'll build this great community, but there's no guarantee for water supply for 100 years. And that's the standard that we've been going by. That needs to be fully enforced. I don't know how that's going to go about it. I do rely on our experts and our coalitions and various groups that will have a better idea. Another thing is that we have to also simultaneously make sure that all regions of Arizona receive adequate clean water. And right now, our indigenous land and communities are still way behind. We need to work with our neighboring states on conservation. We need to further, have more water conservation agreements among other states to maximize the water amount. We also need to regulate cattle and agriculture so that they don't get left behind, but yet they won't be able to take the cake either from the communities that they are, doing business in. So there's always a fine balance that we need to have consideration. So when we go to the table to write and draft bills, that we will bring the best ones so we can have a bipartisan support.
Thank you. And Senator Diaz, same question to you. What policies would you like to see the state take to effectively manage its groundwater?
Well, I agree with Ms. Sun. She said that the development takes away some of our water and it can overuse water, and that is a big concern. So in writing the bills for housing, I think that it's important to take that into consideration, make sure that we're not overusing the water. And then just also, I think it's important for us to take the recommendations from the Governor's Water Policy Council, and then also our state and House and RU committees, natural resources, energy, and water, and really work with our Democratic colleagues on best policies for water conservation.
Thank you. And you both kind of touched on this in your answers, but I want to put a finer point on it. Do you support the requirement in Arizona's Groundwater Management Act that developments in the AMAs, the specific areas, must prove they have that 100-year assured water supply before building? We'll start with you, Senator Diaz.
Yes, I do support that.
And what would you say to some of the, we've seen some criticism in the development community that that's potentially stifling growth. They'd like to see some alternatives. What's your argument to keep that in place? I'm
sorry, can you repeat the question?
I apologize. We've seen the development community kind of in some cases criticize that, say they'd like to see some other ways to prove that 100-year water supply. I guess, what's your argument for keeping that requirement as it is in place, and why is it necessary to keep that there?
Well, thank you, Wayne. My argument is to hold developers accountable for that water use, and having a baseline for the amount of years that.
Thank you. And Ms. Sun, same question to you. Do you support keeping that requirement in place, and please explain why?
Oh, absolutely. That actually directly affects our economics, our state revenues, as well as quality of life. I mean, it's almost insane to even say, like, well, we're going to build this home, but you only get half a roof. you know? So if it rains, you can just stay on the other side of the house. How can you build a home when there's no supply of water without water guarantee? Granted, the developers are always going to push because they just want to build. Their responsibility isn't the water supply. They don't feel like that's their responsibility, but it is our state responsibility to regulate all parties involved to make sure that we have a quality of life, equity, and a foundation for our economic growth in the coming century.
Thank you. And we're going to switch gears a little bit here. We have questions coming in. This one is for you, Ms. Sun. It has to do with your previous stint in the legislature. Given that you resigned after facing an ethics complaint, dealing with some of your interactions with local officials, what is your pitch to voters to say, hey, I'm the right person to send back now in the Senate? And how do you restore any trust, any relationship with maybe some of those folks in the community who look at that and have concerns?
When I first ran in 2020, the pandemic, sort of stopped everybody's, campaign track. And before that happened, I was able to hit 5,000 doors. In order to win our primary race, we have to hit 7,000 doors. So in 2022, I hit those 7,000 doors plus 2,000 in additional in the primary. Then I went back in the general election and hit 5,000 more doors. So that's the third time I'm going around. 2024, I hit the doors again. I hit every single door. And every single door has told me to get my butt back into the legislature. This is a kangaroo court. I was duly elected. So it is up to the voters. And if they decide to vote for me to get back to the legislature, then sir, I will do as I am told.
Thank you. And then a bit of a different question for you, Senator Diaz. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background, your qualifications, why you think you're the best person for this job in the Senate, the one senator that this district has to go to the Capitol and represent them in that chamber?
Yes, Wayne, thank you for that question. I'm running for re-election because I want to continue the work I've started at the state Senate. I'm a person who likes to listen and work with people and collaborate. And we need a stable, effective leader and somebody who can work with people to get things done. We need people who will follow through with their responsibilities and finish their term. I'm that person. I believe I'm an effective leader because I'm able to work with other people. I'm a leader who puts constituents first. And voters need to do their research on the candidates and find out what they stand for before they vote.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to some of the more contentious topics that have gone through the legislature this year. We just saw yesterday a controversial border measure move through the Senate. And so we've heard from both Republicans and Democrats that the federal government has failed to address problems at the border, problems with immigration, and Republicans at the legislature are saying that this ballot referral is a solution, but Democrats have universally opposed it. So first, do you believe the state should play a role in responding to these issues? And we'll start with you, Senator Diaz.
Thank you, Wayne. No, I don't believe the states should have a role in this. This is a federal issue. This resolution that we voted against yesterday, HCR 2060, is unconstitutional. It violates people's due process rights by allowing Arizona to deport people even if they qualify for or are pursuing legal immigration status. In the past, we've seen Arizonans stopped by police because of the color of their skin or the languages they speak. Family members arrested by police because they can't prove their immigration status. Victims reluctant to call the police due to the threat of detainment and deportation. It's not going to work, and it is a federal issue, not a state issue. I guess yesterday I did vote no, and I fought with my caucus to stop this. We need to treat people with dignity.
Thank you. Ms. Sun, same question. Do you believe the state plays a role in addressing these issues?
I think the border issue is a federal jurisdiction, but as a state, we have to have a voice and an input with what the federal have in mind. They had a chance to pass a bipartisan with the border, and they did not because they want to continue to use it as a political, stunt. But as a state, we need to be vocal. We need to come out and protest because this is just unconstitutional. It violates every grain of our existence as a citizen of the United States of America. We have to abide by our Constitution. And when we pass a bill like this that is so harmful, it violates and degrades our constitutional values that we all 50 states stands on. So as far as having our state Arizona to be involved with the border issue, that's not our jurisdiction because that's not what's written, but we need to be adamant on what is right for our communities. And these, individuals needs to be treated with the utmost respect. They are running away from a country that is in turmoil, which indirectly we have caused. Crossing the border, there's, drugs that are coming in and out. That's a separate group of people, of families that are trying to, run for safety. They need a place for safe haven. Just like my parents and myself came to this country as immigrants, we came here for safe haven, and we all have the right to seek asylum.
Thank you. And you touched on this a little bit in your answer, though. So if it's not the state's role, but you have, we do have voters, and we do have, and your Republican colleagues saying, we've got to do something. What, if anything, can you do as a legislator to help address these issues, even if it's not passing something at the Capitol? What could you do in that position to help address these issues? We'll stay with you, Ms. Sun.
I mean, as a legislature, we have a tremendous platform to, echo our voices and protest of such, barbaric and inhumane, bill, especially this being reincarnated intentionally to hurt, a certain, marginalized communities here in Arizona. We need to now look at where we can position ourselves in the legislature within both chambers with the Democratic caucus to preempt anything like this coming down again. We do need to get the communities involved. In some ways, as sad to say, but it's good for, I think, for the Democratic Party, is that when bills like this shows up time and time again, they're just going to get more people to come out and vote. So I think that's the silver lining. I'm hoping that people can hear the craziness of the Republican Party trying to, oppress, our community members, that we will again come out in drones and vote and flip the legislature.
Thank you. And same follow-up to you, Senator Diaz. If regulating the border itself, immigration, if that's not the state's role, what do you see as the state's role in addressing some of these issues?
I think protecting the people that are here and fighting against these bills, and just fighting for what's fair and what's fighting for justice for these people and for my people of my background who are coming for a better life here to the United States. So just speaking up, following through, and working with team members to get things done, and vote against bills and speak against them, and so that our constituents know how these bills are not supported by us.
Thank you. And then moving to another equally contentious topic that's been at the legislature this year, abortion access. It's a major issue for Democratic voters. What is your stance on the issue? And again, what role do you think the state, whether it's the state of Arizona or the federal government, what the state as the government, what role do they think you think it should play in regulating access to abortion? And we'll stay with you, Senator Diaz.
Well, I believe that no one in Arizona should have their body and decisions about their future controlled by the government. I voted aye for my district to uphold the privacy and autonomy of every one of my constituents. Our rights are not protected unless they are enshrined into the Constitution. The repeal does not mean we're safe. Tomorrow we could see the majority party get up and cut the abortion ban back further. And Arizonans can't trust this body to follow the will of the majority of Arizonans.
Thank you. And Ms. Sun, same question to you.
Body autonomy, that needs to be protected and preserved, for the sake of, all Arizonans. This affects not just women, but men, and in any, economic, ranks. We also had to, look at it on a personal level and also on a political level. Me personally, to have this draconic, bill to, ban abortion, sending us way back to the Civil War time. And what about women who don't have, access? Because if you're wealthy and your state doesn't allow you to have abortion, you can go somewhere else to have it. And then what about the people that are poor? They're going to be forced to, have their children and create a strain economically. And yet they cry that there's just too many children being born in the people of color. I mean, damn if you do, damn if you don't. But at the end of the day, women's right relies on this. We need to have this not only codified, but it needs to be enshrined in our state constitution. And that is something the legislature can do politically. And again, that goes back to flipping this legislature and to promote and to get that referendum passed. So I urge you all, the voters, to go out and vote on that on the ballot so that we can have that enshrined in our constitution. It's in our hands, so let's take it.
Thank you. And you took the follow-up question away from me. I figured I knew your answers based from what your answer would be based from what both you just said, but I'll give Senator Diaz the chance to say it as well. I assume you support the referendum that will put essentially pre-Dobbs abortion protections into the Arizona State Constitution?
Yes, sir. I do support it. And as I talk to voters going door to door, this is something else that I'm referencing and encouraging people to vote for.
All right. Thank you both. And I'm gonna shift back to the budget for a second, because again, as I like to remind folks, it is the one thing that y'all are required to do down there if you're elected. So I know cutting taxes not only always popular for Democratic candidates, but I want to know, are there any circumstances you could foresee in the future? Like, what circumstance would you vote to potentially cut taxes? And if you had to cut them, what type of taxes would you like to see cut? Go to Representative Sun and then back to Senator Diaz after that.
The taxes is, it varies. I mean, you have to look at the level of where the tax is being cut. We need to have more tax cut for the wealthy. They're just not paying their share, but yet they're always coming to, the working class. There was a flat tax, but that reduced the coffer. So that was less for our budget. We need a certain amount of tax revenue coming into our coffer, but we have to make sure that that is being paid across the board percentage wise, not just, a break for the wealthy. I'm very against corporate welfare, corporate handouts, and corporate greed. So when it comes to taxes, I'm going to make sure that everyone pay their fair share of taxes. So if we're going to select what kind of taxes that we want to cut, then let's give it to students, single parents. Those are the ones that needs the biggest tax break.
Thank you. And same question to you, Senator Diaz. Are there areas of taxes you could envision cutting in the future? Obviously, we're in a deficit now. It's hard to have this conversation, but as we've seen year to year, budget situations can change. So are there areas of taxes you could see yourself voting to cut in the future? Oh, you're on mute.
I believe that what I would do is ensure that the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, because this money needs to go back to public education. Public education is not benefiting from the wealthy not paying their fair share of taxes.
Thank you. And sticking on the budget topic, infrastructure is also obviously critical to economic growth, and it's critical to folks' everyday lives. Anyone who's sat in a traffic jam on a freeway they feel is too narrow or hit a pothole in their car knows that infrastructure is important to everyone. So what areas of Arizona's infrastructure do you believe need the most investment, and how would you prioritize funding those things given the budget situation? We'll stick with you, Senator Diaz.
Yes, Wayne, I believe that our streets need to be safe for our families, and our freeways need to make sure that they're made so that there's not so much congestion. Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, it just which areas of infrastructure do you believe need to be prioritized, and how would you go about funding those things?
I think that the areas are our roads and our freeways, and I would make that a priority in our budget, in our state budget.
Yeah, thank you. And Ms. Sun, same question.
I lead the Prop 400E initiative for our Democratic caucus on the House, and it was passed with success. One of the stipulations of supporting the Prop 400E was to get the rural community on board. Now, you would think this is just for Maricopa County. Why would the other 12 counties be interested in helping and supporting and passing the Prop 400E? Well, there is an allocation that is shared with the entire state of Arizona. If we were to, which we did, we passed the 400E, but that brought in so much money into the Maricopa County that there is like a little pocket of money that's shared among all 13 counties where Maricopa agreed not to tap into, so that all of it will go to rural area. When I was on transportation infrastructure, the biggest cry was coming from the rural community. Granted, I don't represent rural districts. I represent Maricopa County, LD22. But it's so important to have infrastructure across our entire state. If you think about it, it is the lifeline of our import-export economics, state-to-state, international, Canada, Mexico route. And if we don't have a robust infrastructure for roads, especially in the rural area, it's going to affect our economics and working families who rely on those businesses and jobs. So if we have any money, probably not in the next 3 years. Again, I had to go back to my original answer, is that if we can look at federal grant and that we can match it and to help the rural communities to pull that federal money dollars, because that's will be our best bet. And we're looking at billions and billions of dollars in the coming decade. So I'm pretty excited to see what our federal administration can allocate from various states. Of course, whoever makes the biggest noise will get the biggest allocation.
Thank you. When we were talking about tax cuts, you both had mentioned making sure it's felt evenly. One thing a lot of Arizonans are feeling right now and have for a while is inflation. So, and not just Arizonans, but folks across the country. What, if anything, do you think a state lawmaker could do to help ease the burden of inflation on Arizona families? And we'll start with you, Ms. Sun.
For me, inflation is kind of touchy. I go door to door, hitting over 30,000 doors as of date. And it's the elderly population that I'm very, very concerned of. Historically, every time when we have an inflation, they are left behind. You know, we're almost saying like, you know, the ones that have retirement money, they'll be okay. But the vast majority of the elders are on a set, you know, income. And if not, they're really below poverty or they're with families, if they're lucky. So I can't help to think that when you talk about inflation, you have to look at where the population is going to get hit the worst. And for me, it's the elderly, and they don't necessarily have a voice because they're not as mobile, and you know, they're not as cognitive. So as an elected official, I think it's our job to make sure that they're protected. So if we're going to be at the Capitol passing 1,000, on the average 1,000 bills a year, we need to now say, we need to look at these businesses and to say, and work with maybe the Attorney General's office, but we need to really have a limit on the inflation rate going, because 10%, 12% at its height, it's just too high.
Thank you. And same question to you, Senator Diaz. What, if any, role do legislators play in helping ease the burden of inflation on Arizona families?
Yes, Wayne, we have a role. We have a seat at the table in our budget discussions, and in making sure that the inflation does not negatively affect the people of our state, in particular, the elderly and veterans and people that are facing mental health issues. So these are people that we want to protect, and so these concerns can be brought to the table in our budget negotiations and discussions.
Thank you. Moving back to current events, there's another ballot referral moving through the legislature that deals with elections and potentially speeding up the counting of ballots, potentially at the expense of convenience. And I just want to know your thoughts on how much of a priority should improving the speed of elections and maybe also the accuracy of election, and not specifically this bill, but any bill, and how much would you be willing to vote in favor of legislation that would increase the budget to speed up the counting or speed up the accuracy? I want to know your thoughts on election related legislation and what you could support. So we'll stick with you, Senator Diaz.
Yes, thank you, Wayne. I would definitely support a budget that protected our voter rights, because our voters need to know that that they have a voice in our state. So this is a priority. This would be one of my priorities. This is my priority as a state senator. And would you mind repeating the question? I know there's a lot.
Yeah, it was a bit of a broad question, so I apologize for that. But just would you be willing to vote in favor of legislation that would increase the budget for things like speeding up the counting of votes or improving election accuracy? Or do you think such legislation exists? I mean, I want to get kind of based on what you've seen at the legislature. I kind of want to let you take that question.
Yes. Yes, I would support a budget that would help speed things up with the elections, because our state is one of the states that where it takes weeks or to find out the results from an election. So I think we need improvements in this area, and this would be something that I would support.
Thank you. Ms. Sun, same question.
I think when we speed up the voting, especially in a purple state, we want to make sure that both sides of the aisle constituents feel confident in the election process. And if we have to, wait and count the ballots and to secure and to make sure that they are accurate, then I'm willing to take those extra days for the, for the sake of all, Arizonans, because we can't rush an election, especially when it's so highly contested and we're in a purple state. We want to make sure that the machine is accurate. We want to make sure that the ballots are being counted. And also we need to look at, the bills that are being passed. They're not really helping that process. If not, it's preventing, voters from having, the right to vote, because the vast majority of Arizonans want a permanent early ballot. They don't want it to be eroded. But because of the shenanigans and the fear of, losing the majority, they know for a fact that the Democrats are working families. They don't have time to all show up on one day to vote. That's just, cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, with our modern technology and with the new machine, being replaced from the old machine that was hijacked and ruined, contaminated by the ninja, the defrauded, incident. I mean, we went through so much, and I think Arizonans, we deserve a dignified process, with transparency and accountability through the process. So speeding it up by how much, I don't know, but the process that we're going through now is secured, is safe, and is ethical, and is equitable.
Thank you. And this will be my last one for you before we all go to closing comments. We'll start. I'm going to start with Senator Diaz. You've both talked about the possibility that Democrats take the majority in one or both chambers this year. We obviously have a narrowly split legislature. What would be your number one priority if that does happen and Democrats take power? So, Senator Diaz, we'll go with you first.
Yes, Wayne. One of my priorities when we take the legislature and the House and the Senate would be to have a limit of ESAs and vouchers, because this is taking money away from our public schools that serve every student, our public schools that have excellent teachers. We need money in our public school system. So that would be, I think that's a majority of the caucus, of the Senate, our Democratic Senate caucus, is to put a limit on the vouchers and the spending, so that our students have a better public education.
Thank you. And Ms. Sun, same question. What's day one priority if Democrats take the majority?
When we know we're going to take the majority, we will have exactly 1 month and a half to get our act together. And I know that we will speed line to a meeting with various stakeholders at the table, and to pass bills and bring them to the table like other states have done. They were able to pass, I think, over several dozens of very important legislature that is progressive and that will move Arizona's forward. Starting off, obviously, the vouchers, either putting a cap or eliminating them, to have permanent voting and so forth, and have things to be enshrined in our constitutions and so forth. There is a laundry list of amazing things we can do, as a caucus once we take the majority. So that is just something that I'm prepared and ready to fight and definitely vote for. I think right now, coming up to the election, the one thing that I'm very, very concerned for all Arizonans is all these ballot measurements, all the propositions that's going to be on this particular ballot. I think it's going to be a historical high. And this is by design to cause a lot of confusion and chaos. And there is a sense of trepidation in my heart to know that we may not vote the right way, because the language is written and how it's printed on the ballot it's going to be very confusing. So I do encourage all voters to do your research on the propositions, the referendums, and so forth, because some of them, the way it's language, if you agree with it, you would think it's a yes, but the answer is to be a no to get and to support the proposition. But going back to your original question, I don't mean to derail, is that I will be prepared. All the great bills that we never gotten assigned, let alone heard, will be the first thing out of the gate.
All right, thank you, and thank you both for sticking with me. I know we've covered a broad range of topics, but I think it was really helpful to for all the voters in your district to hear you cover all these different things. So we're going to move on to your closing statements. You each have a minute, and we'll start with you, Ms. Sun.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, Citizen Collection, for having this debate this evening. I am so honored to be an elected official. Sometimes the rise can be rough, but I am definitely your it girl. Sometimes you have to make those tough decisions and you have to stick to your values. And we need to truly work together on what is positive and what is good moving forward. At the end of the day, we want to live in a society that we can truly care for one another, and we don't need to constantly be in fear of our own elected officials by passing bills averaging 1,000 where no one have any idea what they are. As the legislature, I was the only Democrat member that had 3 standing committees, and I had to go through hundreds and hundreds of them in 1 week during crossover. And that frightened me because I'm here thinking, I can't even keep up with all of these bills. How in the world will our constituents have any idea what they are? And that's why I knock doors. I go door to door every day for the last 4 or 5 years. And they know that they can trust me with with their vote, because they know I've been voting the right way, and I will continue to do so. So again, I ask for your vote, your support, and I will go in and hit the ground running for you.
Thank you. And for your closing statement, Senator Diaz, we went a little over there, so I'll give you the same amount of time, about a minute and a half. Please continue.
Thank you. I'm committed to voters to work professionally with everyone to get the work done. I passed a bill unanimously that would protect special needs students. I'm a member of the Appropriations, Government, and MAPS committees. There's a strong likelihood that we achieve Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate with our Democratic governor. And we have the opportunity for the first time to pass progressive policies. And this is why it's even more important to elect a stable, trusted, and proven leader like myself in LD22. I have support from unions and leaders in the community. As your state senator, I am dedicated to fighting for workers' rights, working families, affordable housing, affordable health care, improvements in public education, and women's rights. To learn more about my campaign, or if you would like to volunteer, please visit my website, evadiazforaz.com.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you to both for sticking with us and answering all these topics. And to our viewers, thank you for sticking in there with us. And we will take a brief break momentarily. This has been former Representative Lisa Sun and Senator Eva Diaz, who are running for Senate. And we will be back momentarily to speak with Betsy Munoz, who's running for the Arizona House of Representatives. Welcome back. We're here at the Clean Elections primary debate for Legislative District 22. I have Betsy Munoz, one of the candidates running for the House of Representatives, with me. We have a little bit of a change to our schedule. Jen Wynn cannot join us. And then, of course, Representatives Lupe Contreras and LD22 are also not here. So we'll be having a Q&A with Ms. Munoz, and so she can share her thoughts with voters on the range of topics we've covered with Senate candidates. So without further ado, Ms. Munoz, take a minute or two and go with your opening statement. Introduce yourself to the voters.
Thank you so much, Wayne. I appreciate it. And I appreciate for the Clean Elections Commission having me here. Just so you all know, my name is Betsy Munoz, and I'm a lifelong resident of our district. So I am specifically a native of the Tolleson and West Phoenix area. I am a proud product of our public schools, especially having attended University High School in Tolleson and having been a graduate of Arizona State University, with having received my Bachelor of Science in Public Service and Public Policy with my concentration in Law and Policy. So for me, I currently work for an education nonprofit where I support our students on their college and career journey. And and having seen all the inequities in our system has really driven me to run for office, especially because as a product of our public education system, I have seen like the issues that our students are facing, the issues that I faced when I was a student as well. And so I am a strong public education champion, and that is why I'm committed to really fighting for increased funding for public schools, ensuring that within our community, as I've grown up here, that we're having affordable housing options as well. And that with that, we're having jobs with fair wages and benefits that really allows our people to retire in the future. And so I am running clean. So my campaign is a people power campaign. And I really am dedicated to putting our community and our people first above all.
Thank you. And before we get started with the questions, I just want to remind voters that are watching live that you can submit a question at any time. You can email debates@kc-a.com. You can text 408-302-1810, or you can call 480-937-1253. And we'll get into it. So I want to start with the same question that I started with the others, given that the budget is the one priority that legislators have to pass every year. So given that we're facing a deficit, tough decisions need to be made. What's an area that you'd like to see cut, but you would cut as to help balance the budget?
Yeah, that is definitely a critical question. So for mine, I definitely think we need to focus on increasing our funding for public schools as a result and doing away with our ESA voucher program, because it is essentially draining funding from our public schools and really at the end of the day, draining our budgets. And so that's one of the focuses I think we need to prioritize at the legislature, and also ensuring that we're cutting funding from our private prisons and getting rid of the flat tax as well, because that's also is what's impacting our budget and in terms of what we can use it towards. So that makes sense.
Okay. And so you mentioned public education. Any other areas where you'd like to increase funding?
Yes. So I definitely think we need to increase funding, of course, within our public education system, but also looking in how we can develop affordable housing options, especially because with my generation and many others right now with our housing crisis, many people aren't able to afford to own a home or are currently being priced out of their homes, right? So what are some of the pathways that we can create in terms of affordable housing, really making sure that we're focusing in on that and that our residents' needs are being met in that sense.
And so you mentioned affordable housing. What are your thoughts on the legislation that's been passing through the legislature this year and last year to address affordable housing? It's mostly focused on deregulation at the local level. Do you think this is part of the solution?
I do think with our affordable housing and the crisis that we currently have in terms of supply and demand, it is part of that solution because of the fact that we have been able to legalize casitas or accessory dwelling units, and it's part of what we need in terms of being able to create those options available for our community, for our people to be able to have a place to stay, to be able to have different options in terms of how they can have that place that they call home.
But are there other solutions you'd like to see beyond that?
Yes, so I do think we can definitely look into things such as like rental assistance and utility assistance as well in that effort to really address affordability and the spike and increase for our current houses that we have on the market.
Okay, thank you. And let's just jump right into some of those kind of topical issues that I talked to the Senate candidates about. First, the border security legislation that's moving through the Senate, moved through the Senate, is moving through the House now. both Republicans and Democratic officials have said that the federal government has failed to address border and immigration issues. What do you think the state of Arizona should play a role in addressing those problems?
I think when it comes to our immigration issue, that is definitely a federal issue. And when it comes to this bill specifically and the what has been being pushed for at the legislature, we need to focus in on how we are supporting currently our community because of the fact that this is a personal issue to me, especially as a daughter of immigrants. I do take it personally in that sense. And so this is not an issue that needs to be handled at the state level. And definitely it's not an issue that should be being pushed forward at the state legislature because it is unconstitutional.
And then more broadly, what can a legislator do? What can the state do, if not addressing the border issue specifically? Are there any other things, any other solutions you'd like to see to address maybe ancillary issues that are connected to this?
Yeah, so I definitely think it comes down to the type of supports that are being provided to our residents at the end of the day, in terms of when it comes to what are we providing to them when it comes to the immigration system, in terms of whether they're looking at the assistance that they're able to access, if that makes sense, because many of our residents, regardless of their immigration status, are still paying taxes. And so in that case, right, how are we looking at the supports that are being provided to them in terms of addressing those issues when it comes to looking back at our affordable housing crisis and looking back at how it's impacting our public education system as well? Because at the end of the day, the majority of our students, they are our future workforce, right? So how can we ensure that we're supporting our students, regardless of their status, in that effort?
Okay, thank you. And then going to the other topic, we talked about abortion access, big issue for Democratic voters specifically. What's your stance on the issue, and what role do you think the state or the federal government should play in regulating access to abortion?
Yes, so I believe that abortion care is a human rights issue, and that decision should be made between a healthcare provider and the person who's being directly impacted by that. And I don't think the state should be able to have a say when it comes to that decision being made, right? And so I do think, and I am a strong proponent of supporting the ballot initiative that we have for Arizona abortion access and making sure that we're protecting that right for our community, and that it's only the decision made between our healthcare provider and the person who's directly impacted.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to water. Obviously, a major issue in the West Valley, in the East Valley, especially the growing communities, right? When we're talking about addressing the housing shortage, developers can't build houses if they don't have that water supply. So first off, what improvements or reforms would you advocate for when it comes to the way that the state manages its groundwater in order to address problems we're facing now and those that we could face in the future?
I definitely think when it comes to having effective groundwater management, we need to look at our climate crisis and ensure that when it comes to our access to groundwater and how we're doing this process, is that we're looking at and having it through a lens of sustainability and what can the state do to ensure that we have long-term access to clean water, especially for our rural communities, and a lot of our communities, to ensure that they have access to water long-term, right? And so how can we hold developers accountable in that regard and ensuring that we're supporting sustainability initiatives, be able to address some of that climate change issues that we're having and mitigate some of the negative impacts that are stemming from that.
And do you support keeping that 100-year assured water supply requirement before building in place for in the active management areas?
I think we definitely need to ensure and focus in on having our residents in our communities across the state have access to clean water, right? So whichever initiative we can take to do that is kind of the approach we need to go into and ensure that we're not only guaranteeing that right to clean water, but also that we're focusing on where residents are asking for in terms of that, right? So how is it impacting their community, or especially with our reservations, and how it's impacting them negatively in that sense as well.
Thank you. And then going back a little bit to budget and taxes and all that, you had mentioned before getting rid of the flat tax that had passed under former Governor Doug Ducey. Are there any circumstances where you think you could vote to cut taxes? Any specific taxes that you think are problematic or you'd like to see done away with?
I definitely think with the increase in inflation and what's been causing and impacting our community in that sense, we really need to look at more in terms of like assistance and what supports we can provide to our residents and our people at the end of the day in that regard, because the fact that with that increase in inflation, it has caused several issues. And so in regards to that, in terms of when it comes to like our funding sources and things of that sort, we need to focus in more on how we're supporting a community and where we are making those cuts, right? So in that regard, I think that's why we do need to cut that funding from our private prisons and making sure that we are getting rid of that flat status so we can redirect some of the supports and some of that funding elsewhere to be able to create more of like a balancing in terms of what is available to our people and how they can access it.
And you mentioned inflation. Is there anything else that you think the legislature can do to ease the burden of inflation on Arizona families?
Yeah, so I think we can definitely look at rental assistance and utilities assistance, especially for elderly population who has a fixed income, or a good portion of them have a fixed income, or when it comes to our single parents or those who are disabled, looking at those types of assistance and resources that we can provide to them at the end of the day to ensure that we're meeting their needs still, even with the rising costs that have stemmed from inflation and that have led to that issue, right? And that continues to lead our community to either not be able to stay in their homes or to not be able to access supports and resources that they need.
And you had mentioned earlier in the conversation, when we were talking about water, ensuring clean water, it can get to everyone throughout the state. That's obviously one big critical infrastructure issue. Are there any other areas of infrastructure that you believe need more investment, and how would you like to see those paid for?
I think we definitely need to be supporting programs that will reduce traffic and give people more reliable alternatives to driving. So, right, maybe ensuring that we're having more frequent public transportation, buses and systems available that provide a more robust public transportation system within our state here. So I think that's some of the ways that we can focus in on that in terms of infrastructure. Okay.
And we go a little off script, given, we have this Q&A format here that gives us a little bit of freedom. You said you grew up in the district. What's an issue we haven't touched on yet that in speaking with your neighbors, and the folks you're talking to, is important to the district? How would you address it?
One of the issues when it comes, especially when I have been knocking on doors and talking to our community members, has been in terms of diversifying the job opportunities available, because a large portion of our community does travel further east for their jobs. And right into that adds in travel time, travel time both ways, and that adds in when you're considering traffic and when you're considering the amount of gas and money being spent towards that maybe redirecting some of the availability of those jobs and diversifying the jobs available within like our West Valley and across, like specifically within our district, right? So ensuring that we're kind of looking at that and how we can focus in on that as well.
Do you have any ideas on how you think you could attract more jobs, either to the district or neighboring districts, to be closer to home for your constituents?
I definitely think when it comes to the job opportunities available, we need to focus in on ensuring that we're supporting our unions in that effort as well, and looking at our community stakeholders and which partnerships we are bringing within the state, and focusing in on that to be able to diversify some of those job opportunities to also increase the wages that are available within our district. So within the jobs that we currently have, to make sure that it is a livable wage for our people and that they are able to retire in the future, right? And so focusing in on how we're working with unions in that effort and how we're working with our community stakeholders to bring in some of those job opportunities available here as well.
Okay. And in this upcoming primary, you're going to be facing two folks who already hold the office, one longtime incumbent, another who was appointed recently. Can you tell the voters a little bit about yourself, why you think you're the right choice to be sent to the Capitol to represent your district?
So as someone who is not only like just a born and raised here in Arizona, but specifically I grew up within my district, right? So I have seen kind of the changes that have been shifted out throughout the years. And in my work that I do for an education nonprofit, I do work with some schools within my district in terms of making sure that our students are supported and that they have the resources and access to be able to achieve a post-secondary education, whether it's a trade school program, a certificate, university, college. And that leads back into helping develop our next generation of leaders. And so for me, I'm kind of doing that work day in and day out with our students. And having grown up in the district, I do have that kind of the unique lens of having had my experience in my current role and having grown up here, along with continuing to fight at the state legislature to ensure that we are increasing access to affordable housing, looking at how we're supporting our public education system, and focusing on the ways that we're ensuring that we're working with unions in that effort. And because of that, I think it's the reason why, with having been a lifelong resident of this district, it's what makes me uniquely qualified for this position.
Thank you. And another question I'd pose to the Senate candidates, if the Democrats take the majority in the Arizona House, what are some of the priorities you'd like to see pursued day one, if they have control?
Yeah, so day one, I think it's definitely looking into, for me personally, looking into public education and affordable housing and how we can support those options, right? Because at the end of the day, it is these issues are interconnected. So how we're supporting our public schools and our students directly impacts how we're able to support our communities at large, and in terms of like the future workforce that we will be having in that regard, and the economic investment that we'll be having within our community is tied into our education system, and looking into, with that, the affordable housing options, being able to allow our people to reside within their homes or to be able to access home ownership, which my generation can't do. And so focusing in on those issues because of the increase in spikes when it comes to the cost to either own a home or to rent a home, and the lack of funding to public education has significantly impacted our community to where now our students are struggling to access some of the supports that they need to be able to move on to those next steps, right? And then focusing in on, again, how are we working with our unions and supporting to ensure that we have jobs with fair wages that allows our people to retire in the future, because we need to invest in the community first, in order to be able to like have that positive investment into our state as a whole, right? But it comes down to ensuring that we're putting people first before anything else.
Uh-huh. And you mentioned public education being an important part of that. You earlier in our conversation, you had said, you didn't believe that that the ESA program was pulling funds away from public education. If you were elected, if there's a majority and you're looking to fund public education, do you believe is it just ESAs? Is that really what the big drain is? Or do you believe there's other funding sources you'd like to see redirected to public education as well?
I do think the ESA voucher program is one of the biggest sources of draining for public education. I know our formula also needs to be reviewed as well when it comes to how we're funding our public schools, and seeing if how we can address that to ensure that we are up to date when it comes to using that formula for funding our public education system, and and how that trickles down to our schools and the districts, right? And reviewing in that regard of like, okay, if we're able to fund our public education system, how can we ensure that we're redirecting those funds to our schools and to our students, and how it's being distributed across the board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into what my follow-up was going to be, which is, if you are able to inject more money into public education, where specifically would you like to see that money go? Obviously, we say public education, but there's teacher pay, there's student supports, there's infrastructure, there's building. It's a lot of things. So where would you like to see that money go?
I would definitely say teacher and staff pay, as well as student support. So because with our teachers, to be able to really have teacher recruitment and retention, we need to ensure that we're paying them accordingly, and that we're paying them a salary where they are able to stay here within the state and be able to go to the classroom and have the resources for their classrooms that are needed. And looking at student supports, right? So then that can be a variety of different things. So ensuring that in increasing funding for public education, we're increasing the ability to have the resources available within our classrooms, whether it's books, whether it's ensuring that they have enough desks or chairs, or that they have enough lab coats. I mean, when I was a student, I remember we didn't have enough funding to buy lab coats, and we had like our lab coats taped up with duct tape. And that's what we worked with because it's what we had available. So, right. So it's like making sure that our students have those resources and supports in place, as well as looking at social and emotional supports as well, and how we can provide some of that funding for our students so they can have more of that holistic approach when it comes to being able to going to a public school and accessing that. And of course, with our teacher pay increasing, right, staff pay, because there is a lot of our school staff members who are working day in and day out to ensure that our students and our schools are running smoothly, and looking at how we can best support them in that effort.
Thank you. And I want to touch, before we finish, I want to touch on elections as well. The topic of election legislation, changes to elections, whether elections are secure, has obviously been a dividing line between Republicans and Democrats, and sometimes between different factions of the Republican Party. I want to know if you're satisfied with the way elections are administered, run in this state, or if you think there are places the legislature could look to tighten up, whether it be within the speed of counting votes or the security of elections or any other topic related to elections.
So I do think we have a great system here when it comes to the security of our election system, especially when it comes to the different options to be able to vote. I do condemn the attempts by our Republican Party in terms of attacking early voting and vote by mail, as many of voters do use that system. I personally also use that system as well. Our system is accurate, and it hasn't really shifted in terms of causing any voter fraud or any of those issues. Those are very minimal issues, and percentages are very, very low. So I think for that end, we do have a secure election system, and I don't think there really needs to be a shift regarding addressing that, or in terms of minimizing the options for where people can vote. Because if anything, right, we are wanting to ensure that our people's voices are heard. So we need to protect those different options available for our community.
Okay. And this will be my last one for you before we get to your closing statement. Going back to the possibility that the Democrats take the majority in the House. Even if they do that, the likelihood is it'll still be a very evenly divided legislature. So how can you talk a little bit about your ability to work with the other side, because it'll be the reality of legislating, whether the Democrats are in the majority or the minority party.
Yes, so I currently do have close relationships with legislators at the Capitol right now. And so for me, it is important to ensure that we are working and having that bipartisan support, but really focusing in on, how are we addressing the needs of our community at the end of the day and putting our people first. So with working with the other party, right, how can we ensure that we're doing that? And at the end of the day, putting those needs of our people from our different districts as the number one thing. And it's part of the reason that's why I'm running clean, because I'm not going to be influenced, nor would I be influenced otherwise either. But I wouldn't be influenced by any corporations, businesses, or any other type of special interest group in that regard, because my campaign is purely people powered, right? So that's going to always be my focus, especially when it comes to fighting at the legislature and honing in on that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for sticking with me through all these different topics and appreciate all of your thorough answers. I'll give you now a few minutes to give your closing statement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So for me, as I had mentioned, I am a strong public education champion. And in my work, I really do hone in on how we are supporting our students on their college and career journey. In that effort, I do work with counselors and college and career specialists and coaching them on how to better support our students, right? And for me, in that effort, I'm working with both staff, but I also do get to do work with students directly. And so I do see the teachers, I do see the issues that our students are facing on a consistent basis. And being involved in the community in that sense and with my schools directly, I can kind of see that day in and day out. And so having been a resident and having grown up within Tolleson and West Phoenix, having been raised here within my community, I have that unique lens, and that's what I'm going to fight and continue to represent when I'm at the legislature, because I'm there to represent the interests of my people, my community, ensure that we are supporting our reproductive freedoms, working with our unions in that effort to have the diversity of jobs and have livable wages, and that we are supporting public education in that sense. And so I have been down at the Capitol multiple times, and I'm going to continue fighting for people in that regard and for these issues. And having had that life experience of my community and the legislative experience, that's what I'm going to continue fighting for, and especially within my campaign.
Thank you so much. For all of our viewers, that concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the July 30th primary election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. And good night.
Thank you.